Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. The 53rd World Economic Forum began last night in Davos, Switzerland. The talks are centered around the topics of the economy and the war in Ukraine. Among the members of the delegation from Poland are President Andrzej Duda, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, and Deputy Minister Jacek Sasin. During the debate titled In Defense of Europe, the presidents of Poland, Lithuania, and Northern Macedonia described the nature of Russia's policy as expansionist. Russia is probably thinking more about how to get out of all of this with a saved face. Well, Russia must not be allowed to come out of this with a saved face. Russia must not be allowed to come out of this war with a saved face, that is, to come out with a sense of having gained something, some success. No, in order for it to be safe for the world, not only for our part of Europe, for the world, Russia must fail in this war.
It seems to me that the so-called soft spots in the whole pan-European security architecture right now, apart from Ukraine, of course, and that danger coming from Kremlin, in this direction is Western Balkans.
Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda said he fears that Vladimir Putin, desperate by military setbacks, ignoring Russian citizens' needs, will sacrifice all of Russia's economic potential on the altar of war.
Germans decided that instead of providing humanitarian aid, they decided to deliver weapons. It was first very important qualitative moment in the decision-making of Germany. And now we are in the situation where there is more commitment needed.
Meanwhile, support for Ukraine is assured by the European Union. Brussels will provide 18 billion euros for Kiev's needs this year. Today, the first tranche of 3 billion euros was dispersed from its budget. We have put in place the strongest sanctions ever, which leave the Russian economy facing a decade of regression and its industry starved of any modern and critical technologies. There will be no impunity for these Russian crimes. And my friends, there will be no let-up in our steadfast support. Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska delivered a letter from President Volodymyr Zelensky to Chinese President Xi Jinping. The document is an attempt by Kiev to gain China's support. How does the world expect to reach climate neutrality if it can't even stop the burning down of whole Ukrainian cities? This is what Russia does with its artillery, missiles, Iranian drones. You all know that Russian aggression was never intended to stop at Ukrainian borders. This war can move forward and ignite wider crisis if Ukraine loses. At this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, visitors can see an exhibition on the war in Ukraine titled Home of Russian Crimes. The images by Ukrainian photographers are meant to show what is currently happening in Ukraine. Presenting this evidence of Russian crimes here is so important. I hope that all the participants of the Davos Forum will come here, that everyone will visit this place, even if they are sensitive, or maybe especially if they are sensitive. They should come here, see, in order to know why the Russian criminals are being prosecuted. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, law enforcement forces are clearing city streets from rubble. The recent missile attack on the Dnieper River was the most brutal shelling of all the past 3 months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared it a war crime and said his country will use all available options to prosecute those responsible. What happened in Dnipro? The fact that Russia is preparing a new attempt to seize the initiative in the war. The fact that the nature of hostilities at the front requires new decisions in the defense supply. All this only emphasizes how important it is to coordinate our efforts, the efforts of all members of the coalition to defend Ukraine and freedom, and to speed up decision-making. Dozens of people remain trapped under rubble in the wake of Saturday's attack. Russia notoriously denies deliberate attacks on civilians. Rescue operations have been completed at the site of the tragedy in Dnipro, where a Russian missile struck. 44 victims have been counted there. This is one of the larger terrorist attacks on the local population over the course of this war. A spokeswoman for the Ukrainian Army's Operational Command South, Natalia Humeniuk, reports that there are currently 6 Russian ships in the Black Sea that may have 44 caliber type cruise missiles at their disposal. The fleet also potentially has ballistic missiles at its disposal. One such missile hit a building in Donetsk. A debate was held today in the European Parliament on the corruption scandal with lobbying for Qatar and Morocco as its main focus. President Andrzej Duda also addressed the issue. Representatives of European institutions should stop wiping their mouths with platitudes about the rule of law, which has little to do with their activities, said President Duda.
Przedstawiciele instytucji Unii.
Representatives of the EU institutions, the institutions of the European Union, should finally stop wiping their mouths with platitudes about the rule of law, which, as you can see, with their activities also has little to do. Obvious crimes, practically speaking, were detected by the prosecutor's office, because it was not the European institutions that detected these crimes, but the Belgian prosecutor's office, cooperating with the French prosecutor's office, I think, detected this criminal procedure. They should learn from this. Instead of lecturing others, maybe they should start dealing with the rule of law in their own circles.
Praworządnością we własnym łonie.
We are dealing with the biggest corruption scandal in the history of the European Parliament. It is not a scandal only of Morocco. It is not a scandal solely of Qatar. Because those indicted and arrested dealt with artificial intelligence, dealt with cryptocurrencies, and dealt with Poland. In a report by Fight Impunity, the organization of Panzeri, who is now in prison, we could read that Poland is ruled by white supremacists, fanatical Catholics. Based on these reports, Poland was attacked in this chamber. We were even called fascists, just because the company here did not like what kind of government in Poland was elected. Poland is a proud nation. It has the right to choose governments as it sees fit. Therefore, we will never allow Poland to be spat upon or mocked.
Ma prawo wybierać rządy takie, jakie uważa za stosowne.
White-collar criminals cannot go unpunished. Mrs. Vice President, who is in jail today on suspicion of corruption, has repeatedly attacked my country, Poland. I wonder today, and it is necessary to look at, who cared to shout the loudest here, to take resources away from Poland, when Poland is struggling with what Ukraine is struggling with, when Poland is helping to overcome the biggest aggressor in the world. Who cared about that? This needs to be looked at today. This scandal is staggering, that we are practically finding out new facts every day, and everything points to the fact that we are talking about the biggest scandal in the history of the European Union, a scandal that must be clarified in order for the European Parliament and the European institutions to talk about any possibility today of regaining authority and being considered credible at all. 6 people were killed in a shooting in Goshen, California. Among them was a 17-year-old mother and her 6-month-old baby. Authorities suspect that the perpetrators of the horrific massacre were members of a drug gang.
This morning about 0338, just before 0400, 4 a.m. in the morning, the Sheriff's Office began receiving multiple shots fired, reports of multiple shots fired. Actually, the report was they believed an active shooter was in the area because of the number of rounds that were being fired. Deputies arrived about 7 minutes later. As deputies arrived on scene, they noticed two victims who were apparently dead in the street. The deputies began calling for more assistance and located a third victim of a shooting in the doorway of the residence where the gunfire was coming from. As deputies began searching the area, unfortunately, they began finding multiple victims at this scene. Unfortunately, no one, including the man who went to the hospital via ambulance, he was also pronounced dead at the hospital. We can tell you that we believe we have at least 2 suspects at this point. We also believe that this is not a random act of violence. We believe that this was a targeted family. We believe that there are gang associations involved in this scene, as well as potential narcotics investigations.
As usual, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.